What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but you do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. And when you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Why is there conflict in marriage? The simple answer is because there's two people in marriage. When two people are true to themselves, the likelihood of them agreeing on absolutely everything is highly unlikely. When you have two people, you have two viewpoints, you have two feelings, wants, needs, perspectives, and everything else, and those things can clash. And yet, at the root, is that where conflict comes from in marriage? James says no. James says the reason there's conflict in marriage is not because of the marriage, it's because of the individuals within the marriage, and not just the individuals, but the desires within the individuals within the marriage. The word desires literally means the uncontrolled personal desires to fulfill every passion and whim that promises sensual satisfaction and enjoyment. It's what we want when we want it. Where does that come from? It comes, that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, from our self-centeredness, our sinfulness. In the beginning, those things battle within us, but then they begin to come out, and we begin to battle with each other. Conflicts happen with each other, including our spouse. Now, where did this begin? In the garden. Adam and Eve. God gave them everything they could ever want, but it wasn't enough for them. Their selfish desires caused them to want more than God had already given them. More and more. And God gave them one rule in the garden. Just don't eat from one tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You can eat from any other tree. You can do whatever else in the garden, but don't do that. And the battle started. This perfect place that they had, if they did what God told them not to, would be for them destroyed. And their selfish desires battled. Should I eat? Shouldn't I eat? Should I eat? Shouldn't I eat? And they gave in, and the battle continued. Not just within them, but now the battle spread to between them and God, and between them and each other. Where does conflict come from? Conflict comes when we seek to fulfill our desires outside of God and His will. So, if that's the battle, how do we deal with the battle that is raging within? James in verse 7 says, "Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and He will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up." How do we deal with the battle within? Submit yourselves to the Lord. Voluntarily yield yourself to Him. Stand against the devil, your enemy. He wants nothing better than to destroy your marriage. Understand that. Get it. And draw near to God. Rely on His power to battle the enemy. Stay connected to God at all times in your marriage with prayer and study of the Word. Talk to Him throughout the day. Confess your sin to Him daily. Acknowledge your weakness. Rely on His strength. Keep yourself from selfish influences. Delight in His grace and His forgiveness, and it will transform the way that you look at your spouse. Your spouse is not the enemy. Satan is the enemy. And you and your spouse are to battle against him in the power of God. So do this, and God will lift you up. That's the root of conflict in a marriage. So besides our self-centeredness, what are some other, perhaps more outward causes of conflict in a marriage. I'll just list a few. Sometimes we have conflict in a marriage is because we want control of the marriage. Sometimes it's because we feel our spouse is moving away from us. Sometimes it's because our values are different than our spouse. Sometimes it's because we can't stand to lose at anything. Sometimes it's because we're just different in our personalities, in our perspectives, in our sexes, or because we're misunderstood, or because our needs aren't being met. But do you know what the biggest topic of conflict is in marriage? It's money. Two sociologists surveyed 700 couples and found that all of them fought over the same issues: money, children, recreation, personalities, in-laws, roles, religion, politics, and sex, in that order. But a lot of times, conflict is just bickering over a whole bunch of nothing. It's just because we're in the mood. And people handle conflict differently. People don't all fight the same way. Some people are competitors. It's all about the battle. It's all about winning at all costs. Some people are avoiders. It's about having no battles. It's about avoiding it. You don't want to talk about it, and you don't want your spouse to talk about it. Some people are compromisers. They're willing to give so that there is a win-win situation for both. Some people are accommodators. It's peace at any cost. I will give up all of my needs just so that there is peace in the relationship. Conflict is a reality in marriage. It'll happen. So if it is, how do we deal with it? And is there any value to it? Or is it always just bad? Billy Graham has a wife named Ruth. And she was asked if she and Billy agreed on everything. And she said, "Oh my, no. If we agreed on everything, there would be no need for one of us." So when you share your differences in marriage, and you have differences, you are not the same. There's bound to be conflict. So is it always bad? What's the value? Is there any value, positive value, from conflict? And I submit that there is value in working through conflict. It's the value that comes from going through the process of working it out and what happens on the other side that is that which has value. Sometimes it's just sharing our differences. Knowing that we are different people, when we share our differences in marriage, it actually works to expand the marriage. There's things that you didn't even know about or like or were interested in at all until you got married, and then you found out that your spouse liked or was interested in doing those things, and it expanded your world, and suddenly his or her likes came into your life. What we don't want to give our spouse is the impression that their likes, what they're interested in, is unwanted or unimportant because it makes them feel unwanted and unimportant. So without conflict resolution, we would miss out on the chance to grow as people, as individuals within the marriage. It expands our world because of the differences. And let me also say that avoiding conflict just for the sake of avoiding it is also not a good thing. If you bottle up anger long enough, you know what happens. Eventually, you explode in some kind of way. It has very negative physical side effects by bottling it up, keeping it down, and not expressing what's going on in your heart. It also leads to a loss of intimacy because when we refuse to deal with issues, it pushes us away from each other. So we cannot have the intimacy we long for in marriage. Dr. Howard Markham claims that resolving conflict is the key area for staying in love and staying married. And his research indicates that if couples could learn how to resolve conflict better, he believes it would reduce the divorce rate by 50%. That half of those who get divorced would stay married if they would just learn the skills of working through conflict. Now, what benefit does it provide? conflict resolution helps us get to know our spouse on a deeper level. You know, when we are going through a conflict, there is stuff that comes out that we didn't even know about our spouse. That in the heat of the moment, we can reveal things about us that reveal our deepest wants, desires, and needs that our spouse didn't even know existed in us. And sometimes working through conflict can help us to reveal things about ourselves that we need to reveal and they need to know. And it provides opportunities, working through conflict, provides opportunities to express physical, emotional affection. When the fight is over, touch, hugs can occur, which wouldn't have taken place without going through the conflict. So, what are some ways? Let's get to talking about how we work through conflicts and resolve conflicts. And what I'm going to give you today is something that I found by an author named Gary Smalley, who writes a lot on marriage. And he has written a book entitled Making Love Last Forever. And he has something in that book that he calls fighting rules. These are boundaries that we set up that help us to work through our conflict in a productive way and not a destructive way. So I'm going to give you some of these today. They'll all be up here. You can write them down or remember them or whatever it is that you want to do. But what are some rules that we can set up ahead of time that we can agree to? These happen to be his, that he uses in his family when they go through conflicts. But what are some rules that we can set up that help us when we go through conflict to resolve conflict productively and not be destructive as we do it? Here we go. Number one, clarify what the actual conflict is. When you start a conflict, make sure you know what you're conflicted about. So you know how to resolve it. Because if you don't know what the issue is, it's very difficult to resolve an issue that you don't know is the issue. So make sure that you know what you are having a conflict about, which means you have to do some investigation. What are my spouse's needs? What are my spouse's feelings? You have to listen. You have to ask questions and find out what is the issue that we're dealing with right now. Proverbs 12 says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but whoever hates correction, this is literal, is stupid. That's what Proverbs says. Number two, stick to the issue at hand. Once you're in a conflict, once you're in a fight, stay with the issue. Stick to the issue at hand. This is not the time to bring up past issues. All the unresolved stuff in your background, this is not the time to bring it up now. Why? Because then you have a plethora of issues and you're not able to solve anything. So stick to the issue at hand. Proverbs 20 says, it is one's honor to avoid strife, but every fool is quick to quarrel. Don't you love Proverbs? I mean, where else in the Bible can you use the words stupid and fool except in Proverbs? Here we go. Here's another one. Avoid sarcasm. Why do we use sarcasm? Because it's a way for us to hurt. That's why we do it. We do it to belittle. We do it to hurt the other. What happens with that when we do that? Suddenly the sarcasm becomes the issue and not the issue. When people use sarcasm toward us, we feel hurt and we become defensive. And now the issue is the sarcasm and not the issue that needs to be resolved. Stop it. Stay away from the sarcasm. Next, don't use you statements. When our focus in a conflict is on what the other person has done wrong, what do they naturally do? Because of their pride, they become defensive. When we put all the emphasis on them, we put all the focus on them and what they have done wrong, then their reaction, because of their pride, is to become defensive. Change the focus. When our focus is not on you, but on how I feel because of what just happened, the possibility of you who did the wrong thing, feeling badly for them, suddenly goes up. When I see how what I have done has hurt you, because you expressed it in that way, suddenly I feel more sympathetic and compassion for you than if you're just going like this all the time. So next time, rather than, you did this, try, when that happened, I felt hurt, or I felt belittled, or I felt whatever. Take the focus away from them and put it on you, which in turn can draw them in to your world. Next. Don't use exaggerations or hysterical statements. What's an exaggeration? You always do that bad thing. You never do that good thing. You're just like your father. Am I getting a witness here? I think people are relating to this a little bit. What's the problem with that? Do we always, do we never, I mean, really? Are we exactly like somebody else? Come on. What's a hysterical statement? A hysterical statement is something like, this will never work, this is hopeless. It's saying that something is not possible in the relationship to resolve the relationship, when in fact, if resolved properly, it is possible. So don't use hysterical statements when in fact it is possible to resolve the issue. Proverbs 16. The hearts of the wise make their mouths prudent, and their lips promote instruction. Here's the next one. No name calling, no silent treatments. Name calling or labeling someone as something sidetracks people from the issue. If in my anger I say to you that you're a such and such, I mean I'm calling you something based on what I feel that you have done, then that person that I have labeled suddenly becomes defensive, and the issue is no longer the issue that they did, but now the issue is that you called them something. Again, we're getting sidetracked from the issue that needs to be resolved. So stop sidetracking and stick with the issue. Stop labeling people, because that then becomes the issue. And the silent treatment, I understand the silent treatment because sometimes when we hurt, we become silent because that's what we do. We close up when we feel hurt. But if we're using silence as a weapon, it doesn't work. If our desire is to resolve the issue, silence will not resolve the issue. Silence just puts the issue off and the hurt remains. Next, resolve hurt feelings as you resolve the conflict. Sometimes when we are resolving conflicts, things come up that hurt us in the conversation as we were resolving the conflict. When those things come up, the possibility is there for us to get sidetracked from resolving the issue. So what we need to do is we need to resolve the hurts and the feelings right there. Will you forgive me? I'm sorry. So that we can get back to the issue and away from now suddenly we're sidetracked by the fact that you just said something about me and I'm hurt and I'm defensive, and that's now the issue and not the original issue. All these things sidetrack us from resolving the main issue. So, resolve them. It's better to seek forgiveness for the hurt and get back to resolving the conflict. Colossians 3 says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against one, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Next, keep arguments as private as possible. When we do our stuff out in public, when we have our conflicts out in public, have you ever been on the other side of that and been around that when it's happening? How do you feel when two people are having a conflict in front of you? You feel embarrassed, you feel unsettled, you may even feel hurt. Don't do it. If you have a conflict, you go somewhere where you can resolve the conflict. And don't draw other people into it because it hurts them. And also, if you do it in front of people, you may say something you later regret that you said in front of them. So it may save you some embarrassment too. Next, reflect honor and respect in all your words and all your actions. Romans 14 says, "Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and mutual edification." Finally, resolve conflicts with win-win situations. Seek to have, as you're resolving the conflict, both of you agree to the solution of the conflict. If a conflict is resolved by one person winning and another person losing, that does not resolve the conflict, because losing continues the feeling of hurt. Make sure that both of your needs and wants are met, are understood, and you will both win. Proverbs 17 says, "Better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife." Now, these are the fighting rules that Gary Smalley has come up with in his family. You can come up with your own, but these, I think, are very effective and probably deal with most of the things that go on in conflicts that we don't do very well. There are boundaries to make sure that the process stays positive and productive. Romans 12 says, "Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you. Live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge. I will repay,' says the Lord." So live at peace and let God take care of the rest. So as we close, we're going to look at one more couple and see how they resolve their conflict.